Hi, good morning. This is Grace Walker. I'm the social media coordinator with Cultural Academy for Excellence. And we are doing a continuing series of discussions so that our audiences are kept informed and updated on what are some of the concerns and thoughts and supporting efforts that CAFE and its core of professionals can provide you with to help you. So today we're speaking with Dr. Ash Webb, and I'll have her introduce herself and tell us a little bit about her association with CAFE and just tell us what we should be aware of and how we can best facilitate this environment since COVID. Welcome to the platform, Dr. Webb. I appreciate you being here and taking time for Cafe today.
Well, thank you so much, Miss Grace, for the invitation. As you know, a parent of Cafe, it's always a lot of pride and joy with me to be able to talk about the program and to empower the parents and the children as well. So, in my professional world, I am the president of Healthy Kinder International. So, our goal, our mission is to continue to promote healthy lifestyles for families, which we do through workshops, seminars, training, ventures, as well as speaking engagements. So during the month of May, we actually just completed a series on mental health because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And it's clearly not a secret that right now in all of our communities, we're seeing a rise of racial and social tensions as we really have to address some underlying issues that are impacting all of our families. So I think it's, very timely that we're having this conversation as the kids will continue to have questions and concerns, and sometimes even for us as adults, we have our anxieties and our worries as we face these uncertain times. So I want to first touch a little bit on mental health because I think we have to understand it's not just taking care of our bodies where we have physical health, but we do have to take care of our minds, our feelings, our emotions, our thoughts, our ideas, and our behaviors. And this is what we call mental health. And anytime we have any form of challenge, it will cause our mental being to come a little bit out of order.
Mhm.
And so having a wellness check in this area is very, very important, especially for our children.
Mhm.
Um, we think that they don't perceive things the same way we do. And of course, they have total different perspectives because they don't have our experiences. But they do have questions. They are hurting. They are concerned. These kids have nightmares and terrors about things that they see on TV. So
Mhm.
it's really important for us to, be aware that our kids are struggling as well as we are. So for the cafe family, I know many of the kids have been socially distanced, they've been quarantined in a way, and they miss each other. They miss having that social interaction, seeing each other, hugging each other, even receiving that from the parents as well as the tutors and the staff. And they do want to know when will the norm come again? When can we see each other? And
Mhm.
unfortunately, we're coming to the end of the program. And many of the kids always look forward to the graduation, those end of year activities, where they get to showcase all their work and all the wonderful things they've done during the year. So many of them will miss out on this because
Mhm.
we have to do everything virtual. And so this time of change is kind of difficult when they don't understand what's really happening. But honestly, with the summertime coming and more people are going out as we start relaxing a little bit on social distancing, we are going to see a rise again of COVID. because many people aren't just wearing masks. They are not social distancing. We're basically trying to party and have a good time again. Um, but we're not willing to do it in a quarantine fashion. So I think we're going to see a number of challenges. So if are not careful, we're going to have to go back into this quarantine state. So, I really want to urge the cafe family, let's continue to be vigilant about, making sure the kids are washing their hands, wearing masks if they have to go out. Of course, children under 2, it's not recommended that they wear masks because especially when in the heat, because they have difficulties breathing, right? But for most of the children, we still need to be able to protect them as we take them out. So when we look at, some of the other issues that our kids have dealt with, the cafe population, I'll talk primarily because we have seen this organization reach out socially to a community that otherwise may appear to be marginalized, right? And so their means to technology, to Wi-Fi may be limiting. We've seen a number of food shortages, and Cafe has done a tremendous job, making sure to distribute food to the families and the neighbors in that area. So for many of the kids, they welcome that because a lot of the children used to get lunches, school lunches, and not having schools open at this time, an organization such as Cafe being able to distribute food is just perfect timing, right? So we're meeting those physical, tangible needs as well. But I still think we have to understand these kids also need the social interaction.
Yeah.
So here's the challenge for our parents. Many of them don't know how to do this, especially if there's only one gadget for 5 children in the household, or everyone can't be, connecting with their friends through social media. Sometimes it's not allowed in certain households. But I really want to encourage all parents, let's relax a little bit on those, opportunities to pull the kids back from social media, but rather let's allow them to bond, even if it's 30 minutes, social time. And if they're on the gadget, then great, but let's limit their screen time as well, because they are getting an overflow of videos being shared or conversations being had, and it's creating a lot of uncertainty for the children. And I think now we're seeing a number of individuals in communities, such as the ones many of the cafe kids come from, where they are seeing increased use of drugs and alcohol. They are seeing abuse, domestic violence, a lot of yelling, cussing, screaming, maybe not in their actual home, but into the neighbors, and we have to be mindful of that, because these are some of the things that will create anxiety and depression with some of the children, and it makes them very anxious. And unfortunately, many parents, guardians are very frustrated, so they yell at the kids, they scream at them, because they're really transferring their feelings and their challenges onto the kids. So we already knew these might be some issues for some of the children, and Cafe within the walls, we provided the tutors, the parents, the administration staff that provided a lot of comfort, was there to talk to the kids. The beauty in it, many of the individuals with Cafe have been trained in youth mental health first aid, so they know how to approach the kids, to be sensitive to their concerns. So there was still also a fair amount of guidance in some issues where children would talk to the adults about things happening, or they got help with homework, where I know Cafe tried to continue to provide that support virtually. I hope that 100% of the kids had that access, but if not, we need to figure out how do we address this moving forward for the next school year.
Wonderful.
Um, and, for many of these kids, the art, the creativity that comes out of, painting or sculpting or sewing or even playing the pan, these are all therapeutic for the children too.
Hmm.
So if we can continue to find those opportunities to motivate them and keep them well,
Yeah,
um, not just mentally but also physically, because we know stress has a way of taking toll on us physically as well.
of course.
So, I think this is the time to really, um, look into how do we make sure that these kids are exposed to creative activities all the time. So for the parents, we're getting ready for summer. The question is, what can we do? Well, basically, we need to find ways of making sure that our kids will continue to be creative. It might mean playing more music in the house, not necessarily on a steel pan, but maybe the kids can listen to more music. It might train their ears so they become
Hmm.
better musicians at the end. But we need to get them away from the news. This 24 hours of being bombarded with these sad, scary things in this big, wide world, it
Hmm.
can be very traumatic for our children. So we need to still have conversations with them about what's happening, but let them know this is not typical behavior of, how things will necessarily continue to be. So, exposing the kids to a lot less of the news, the bad news, would really help them cope better. And so it might mean, changing the channel. So there's a movie or some, whether it's a family movie or maybe even participating in some kind of fun family game or friend game. And if there's the opportunity to create video chats for the kids with family members or friends, I really encourage parents to do this,
Hmm.
because if they can't get the physical hug, they can get it virtually. They at least can see their family members and loved ones and smile, laugh, crack a joke. Some of the games they could play can be virtual. Miss Grace, in our days before
Hmm.
technology,
Yes.
we found all kind of creative ways. Like here's a picture. How many things can you identify? Or going back to writing a word. Let's say that word is academic achievement. How many
Hmm.
words can you make out of that word?
Hmm.
And just writing ways. So there were fun things that we did, playing cards, playing bingo, Pictionary, and we can bring them virtually as well. But maybe now is the time to teach those kids the way we grew up on certain things. And I think for the cafe family, we have a very open group where, many parents um, stay connected with others. So maybe it's an opportunity to have the kids connect as well. So we still have to practice social distancing, but we have nice, pretty masks now. We could be creative. It would
Right.
have been nice to have the kids actually sew some together, learn
Yeah.
to how to make them during this time, but I know it's difficult. But maybe if they do have access to that at home, maybe, Kathy can demonstrate to them some way of them making creative masks themselves. Something fun, creative, come up with some ideas for some summer projects for them, etc. So there's so many ways that we could support our children during these times. And again, for the parents, the same thing. Don't feel that you have to have it all figured out,
Right.
right? We're all in this together. And it's okay to tell our kids that we don't have it all figured out.
Right.
And, even my kids, as old as they are, because they're high schoolers, we have conversations about it. There are times they get sad to see some of the things that are happening. And, Solala's statement, for example, is these are human beings. Why are we treating each other this way?
Hmm. Hmm.
Or why should the color of our skin matter so much in 2020? It's not, it's not in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
So we've grown so much in so many ways, but we're seeing history repeating itself.
Mm-hmm.
And for the kids, they don't understand this. The change um, is this kind of change is not welcomed.
Mm-hmm.
But they also need to understand that in all pandemics, sometimes it mentally, if you're not well, or you don't know how to problem solve or cope better,
Mm-hmm.
you will snap. So when we see our police officers, for example, who are supposed to protect us, some of them are mentally stressed out that their true selves might be surfacing, or
Yes.
their true feelings about people who are different cultures or different skin tones, they're surfacing. It doesn't make it right. What it means is that we all need to do better and be aware that we can't just vent our ill feelings or our internal feelings about others. We have to be aware that we're still people and we're people with feelings. Otherwise, what message are we sending to our children? And some of them feel, well, if this is the way that I'm going to lose my life, then why work hard? Why
Mm-hmm.
study hard? Why try to advance to do better if this is the way I'm going to leave this earth? And it's unfortunate, especially our teenagers and those getting ready to enter into the college ages. They're still all youth, but they have those questions and they have those concerns, and they are legitimate.
Mm-hmm.
So as a society, we need to address that, but I don't think it's fair to put that burden on these little kids. We let them be aware, but we have to protect them as well. So um, that no matter what comes down the future, they're more mentally prepared. We're not going to be able to accept everything, but I think there are tools that we can use now and teach them. We off let our ill feelings or our feelings of sadness, but it doesn't have to define who we are as a person. And I think using the creative arts is a brilliant way of helping the kids stay that distracted. Even if they need to write down their feelings, if they have no one to talk to, encourage them to do journaling or writing short stories about the times. Cafe has always found creative ways of doing things like that. So I think it's a great opportunity, to get to stimulate the creative centers of the kids and get them to start putting down their feelings in a way of how to can you we solve this problem.
Right. One of the, I would say, admirable things that Cafe has um, provided during what has been our traditional experience, especially now, as you mentioned, where the culmination of all of the work that the kids have put in for the year is celebrated, and usually would have been celebrated in our graduation ceremonies and giving due recognition to kids for all of their contributions, whether it is in the arts, whether it's in their behaviors, whether it's in how they've conducted themselves in their own scholastics, and in our current situation with a pandemic. And now we have that coupled with heightened sensitivities. Um, how do you think we as adults, perhaps as parents, and even as you mentioned, a lot of people who are manifesting behaviors that may have always been suppressed, as we might see in what the dictates of law officers who have become lawless.
Mm-hmm.
How can, what are you in your field, what are you seeing that can possibly be the go between, the how do we help each other to support our well being as
Mm-hmm.
well as those of the people with whom we're closely associated?
Right. So first of all, I would have to say that we need to accept the fact that we can't sweep this under the rug, right? We have to deal with it head on in a way. And so the first thing we have to ask ourselves is, okay, I understand that these um, social injustices are happening, and I have a certain amount of anxiety or fear or anger or
Mm-hmm.
frustration over the matter. And if that's how you feel, which you have a legitimate right to feel that way, the question is, how do I make sure that my behaviors are not over the top,
Mm-hmm.
that I am not adding to the problem? Because sometimes, when we know there's hatred, depending on how we react, we add a layer of that on top of it, and
Right.
it makes compounds the problem. So we need to be able to, first of all, identify if we're struggling individually, mentally, because of this issue. And if we are, then we have to figure out, how do I release this in a positive way,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that I am not adding venom around my family members, around my children, around my community. It's important now for us as adults to really understand if individually we're impacted by this mentally. And if we are, then we need to figure out who's that person that we can talk about this or share about it, so that we don't put a venom within our household that will impact our kids or our communities. So that person might be a loved one or trusted individual, or in some cases, some of us actually need to reach out to a mental health professional or a counselor or therapist. This is a time where we have to openly talk about our feelings and
Yes.
be able to really process them, pull them together in a way that we can still operate with overall good mental well-being, right? And regardless of what we're going through. And so, this is the time sometimes to reach out to a professional. Even for a parent who doesn't understand how to work with the kids,
Mm-hmm.
there are child therapists and child psychologists. A lot of them are opening up their services by telehealth. So, it's just a matter of finding that provider and connecting with them. And of course, for DC, Maryland, Virginia, you can always go to the state mental health departments, and you can find all the resources in the county or the state. Um, so that's one thing that we can do, talk to professionals. The other thing we need to do is to pull ourselves back, just like many of the kids, just as they have to declutter, we as adults need to also pull ourselves back and know our limits, right? When it gets overbearing and it's too much and this is all that we can focus on, we have to learn, I need to pull back. Because the truth is, if we keep flooding our minds with all the negative messages, it will
Yes.
eventually shut us down physically. We're not going to be able to perform our activities as we should. And emotionally, we become unstable, right? So we have to be careful of that, because the way we express our anger and frustration is through screaming, yelling, hitting things, being short with the people who are trying to be there for us,
Mm-hmm.
right? Maybe that's the person in your household. Or sometimes it's so frustrating, you push the ones who you should be giving them a hug, you end
Mm-hmm.
up pushing them away.
Mm-hmm.
And they think it's something they have done, and it's not. It's just that we're transferring our inability to cope or deal with
Mm-hmm.
these situations towards those who are innocent and vulnerable. And so we have to pay attention to it. And I think, when we see what's happening in our community, it makes us pay attention to the fact that each of us are accountable for our actions,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we can't say it's wrong what you're doing, but yet we're verbally and emotionally abusing those who are close to us,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So, it has to go across the board. So we have to all learn how to problem solve better and how to cope, despite, and I'm not discrediting what's happening. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to address some of these issues. But
Mm-hmm.
I think that the way we behave, we have to also conduct ourselves. I was having this conversation with someone just the other day, and we were talking about these individuals you're seeing, they're looting stores. One person throws the rock. That person runs away, and everybody else runs in to grab what they can. The point is, whoever threw the rock at the first the first time, doesn't matter the color of the skin. That person can't force you to take your legs to run in and loot the
Mm-hmm.
one or two stores in our communities that might be serving the needs,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the mindset is, are we just going to keep just being responsive? Are we going to really think through what we can? And I think there are some causes and some fights. I remember the words of Dr. MLK. He always encouraged us, do it peacefully. If you do it destructive and violently, all we're doing is destroying our communities. So peaceful doesn't mean you can't protest and gather and let your needs be met, but it means we don't destroy our stores that are serving our communities, because if they can't serve us, then what do? We already have a food crisis and food insecurity in so many regions. So these are some of the messages that we have to teach our kids. We're going to fight for our rights. We're going to fight to be all American or fight to be, a human being. But we're not going to destroy everything we work so hard to build in those communities to do it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and those are some of the messages that we have to tell our kids. First of all, I have to say, I think that one of the reasons we've avoided mental health discussions for so long is the stigma around the issues, or misconceptions or lack of understanding of what mental well-being really means, right? And especially for those of us in the Caribbean or third world countries, we have seen that. No one talked about mental cultures. We have stayed away from the conversation. No one talks about it. No one talks about your emotions or feelings. And if people voice them, there was a certain amount of judgment. So it forced people to lock down, right? Um, but I think that when we look at our communities where we're seeing all of the violence or the tensions or the crowdings, some of them have been communities that have always been more succumb to police activity and fights and community violence, and let's so to speak. So one thing we have to understand is that our low income communities have a certain amount of resiliency, and that they will continue to thrive through all of these kind of issues. They always have, and they will continue to be that way.
Mm-hmm.
But I think let us all prioritize mental health in our communities. If we know we have anxiety, we have depression, we have all these issues going on, let's start bringing in our experts in these areas who can kind of work with our communities. So yes, we're dealing with social issues, but we're also making sure we're preserving the mental well-being of that community. Because at the end of the day, um, if you don't have your community members well enough,
That's right.
there's a high amount of suicide ideation. There is a high amount of um, increased number of young people, especially being so overwhelmed and consumed, they're getting heavy into drugs and alcohol, which
Mm-hmm.
puts them at high risk of having, behaviors that can be homicidal or suicidal at the end, right? So we need to be able to make sure that we can address these underlying mental health challenges, or we're going to continue to see not just these protests that we're seeing, we're going to see a jump on the suicide rate. Prior to COVID-19, we got 800,000 deaths every single year to suicide, which means every 10 seconds to 10 minutes, somebody in the world was committing suicide.
That's
Was almost 6, and
right.
LaSalle was almost well, he was about 6.5, so she was about 5.5 maybe, and he was 6 to almost 7
Right.
when they began at Cafe. And of course, when they began, it really started as an opportunity for them to be embedded in our culture because both my husband and I played the pan at that time. And we felt we needed to take a back seat. It was their time to learn. But also the academic strength that Cafe had for them at that young age, it was easier as well because it was structured a little bit different. But the kids had an incredible bonding with the older kids.
Yeah.
And some of them actually took them on as a younger brother or younger sister. And that was very, encouraging for us as parents to want them to continue to be involved with Cafe. And of course, they became these little artists and little musicians that we never knew
Mm-hmm.
that we had. And today the kids are very talented. They can read music. Even though Mike and I play, we don't read. We just play.
Right.
And they can also read, so they have an edge on us. And but it's just really for me to, as a parent, just sitting back and listening to them and seeing them go on their performances and know that Cafe has been part of bringing that in them. So for us as parents, there's just so many positives. And I think the integration of various cultures also
Mm.
helps. Yes, they know we're from the islands, but to be around kids from the Hispanic culture or, Asian or African,
Mm-hmm.
even the American culture, it's different. So they get to try different things, see different people. And we've already exposed the kids a lot to seeing different places
Mm-hmm.
and learning about other cultures. So now they get to socially integrate all of those practices in that cafe environment. And they've had a number of phenomenal tutors come through. Some are there from the very beginning, and they meet new ones all the time. So it's always encouraging. I think a program like Cafe will around for eternity, for as long as it can possibly exist.
And congratulations to you and to your husband for being such exemplars of not just professionals who are working and building their own lives, but have been such pillars of the cafe community, um, and given so much to continuing the legacy of the cafe community. And what I hear you saying as we discuss mental health, that it starts with community, it starts with family, and family, then community, and community building has been so instrumental in terms of the cafe philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that in the perspective of all that we see socially, what I hear you say and what you've shared um, is that we as the um, adults in our environments have a responsibility to ensure that those who are in our sphere can learn by example. And so, Dr. Ash, would you um, close out for us with your words of encouragement and support that what you see coming forth from this for Cafe as well as for our community at large?
My message to the cafe community is this: we will continue to be mentally resilient throughout all of this, despite what we see in the news or what's happening, across the entire country. We will be concerned, and we should have a voice on many issues. But I think more importantly, we know that cafe can be a resource for the children to support the parents. And I think that it's important to recognize as parents that if there are opportunities to stimulate our kids creatively during this time, Cafe will continue to reach out to us. And I think that as they continue to connect with their partners and leverage resources, even if it's information sharing, this is definitely an organization to remain connected to during the times. And of course, if your kids have any questions, I am certain they can continue to reach out to cafeyouth.org or, any of those networks affiliated with Cafe to really address some of the concerns for the kids.
So I want to say thank you, Dr. Astril Webb, for for one being a cafe parent along with your husband Mike, and thank you both for your continued contributions to cafe. And on behalf of Lorna Green and Cafe, this sharing that you've done today on mental health is such a valuable resource. It's such an informative piece that we are able to share with the audience. And I want to thank you from Cafe's leadership as well as our community for giving us your time today and for sharing such expert advice to our community. So, Dr. Webb, thank you again, and we appreciate you, and we appreciate all that you've contributed to the Cafe community and continue to do. Thank you again so much. Have a great day now.
Thank you, Miss Grace. It was my honor.
And it was my privilege also.